Hello everyone, welcome to the HTA 101 series. And I'm Lei, I'm Associate Professor at Western Sydney University. And today in this session, I would like to go through with you about the conducting economic evaluations alongside clinical trials. So in this session, we provide you the rationale and the steps of conducting economic evaluation alongside clinical trial. And we also give you an example of how it might be conducted in the real world. So first of all, we all know that health technology assessment is assessment of all relevant aspects of a health technology that include pharmaceutical interventions or any other public health interventions. And in this assessment, we need to assess the clinical effectiveness or efficacy and safety, as well as its economic, social, and ethical implications from that new medical technology. So for the clinical trial, it provides the best evidence to answer the effectiveness or efficacy and safety of that medical intervention. And for the economic evaluation, that will provide a tool to understand the economic benefits of that health technology. So nowadays, there is an increasing trend of cost effectiveness analysis or economic evaluation being planned at the early stage in the clinical trial. And in fact, a lot of the research funding bodies or the HTA bodies worldwide, they encourage of implementing the cost effectiveness analysis even before the clinical trial started. So there is a clear trend of doing that. Actually, there are a lot of advantage of conducting economic evaluation alongside clinical trial, given the planning is at the early stage of the clinical trial, so it will offer the health economists some early opportunity to produce reliable estimates of the cost effectiveness results, and they can report to the whole group to indicate what is the potential economic benefits of that health technology. And second is that given we have the access to the individual level data, which permits us to do a wide range of statistical and econometric techniques and methodologies to analyze the data. So it will definitely provide a lot more information if we don't have the individual level data. So generally, there are 4 steps could involved in conducting an economic evaluation alongside clinical trial. So first of all, we need to identify and quantify of the cost and the effects of care. So the cost that will depend on the prospective analysis and the effects of care that can be taken from the primary outcome of the clinical trial, or that is more probably favored by the health economist, some of the effectiveness measures such as the quality of adjusted life year or disability adjusted life year. We will come back later to this point when we have the example. And second, we need to assess whether and by how much the average cost and the effects differ among the treatment groups. And once we have the average difference in cost and effects, we can make the comparison of the magnitude of this difference in cost and effects and evaluate the value for the cost of the therapy. So normally it can be presented by parameter called the incremental cost effectiveness ratio, or short for ISA. So that may be the main outcome when we're conducting the cost effectiveness analysis. And once we have the ISA, we can compare this value to the cost effectiveness threshold to indicate whether the intervention is cost effective or not, or whether that is worth to be scaled up in the large setting. And lastly, we need to identify the population to whom the results will be applied. So that is generally 4 steps in conducting the economic evaluation alongside clinical trial. So next, I will give you an example. And the example we have made is based on this clinical trial. It's called Effects of Salt Substitution on Cardiovascular Events and Deaths, which is short for SARS. It was a clinical trial conducted in China, and this results probably reports the first evidence showing the salt substitution is effective in preventing stroke as well as deaths in the Chinese population. And later, our group conducted a cost effectiveness analysis alongside this SARS trial. So what do we find? And this table summarizes the effectiveness and the cost effectiveness of the SARS trial. So in the first row, we can see the non-fatal and the fatal stroke by the different study group. And this is a primary outcome from the trial. And not surprisingly, we can see that the intervention group is superior comparing with the comparator group in terms of this primary outcome. And as a health economist, we're probably more interested in the outcomes such as the quality adjusted life year. And in accordance with the primary outcome of the trial, we can also see the intervention group is superior, have a higher quality adjusted life year compared with the comparator group. And given this study is conducted from a mixed perspective of the healthcare as well as the consumer, once we take into account all of this cost, we can see the total cost is actually lower in the salt substitution group compared with the regular salt group. So which makes the intervention cost 7. So what does that mean? If we go to our cost effectiveness plan, well, the x-axis that represent the incremental effectiveness and the y-axis represents the incremental cost, we can see most of the isodose, they actually fall within this quadrant. And which in this quadrant, they have a lower cost, lower incremental cost, but or the negative incremental cost, but a positive incremental effectiveness, which means the intervention is actually cost 7 or dominant compared with the comparator. So lastly, I want to conclude my lecture by telling you some limitations of the trial-based economic evaluation. So given a lot of the clinical trial, they are running for a short time duration given the constraints in the resources. So with this truncated time horizon or short time horizon, it might fail to capture all the relevant events and as well as the cost and the effectiveness that relevant to the intervention and the comparator. So that is one of the limitations. And second is that a lot of the clinical trial, they select the surrogate outcome. For example, in our SARS trial, actually a lot of the previous evidence, they can show the salt substitution have the positive outcome in blood pressure. But in the real world, as a health economist and a public health researcher, and also the policymaker, they're probably more interested in the hard outcome, for example, the death or the real clinical events, such as stroke events and deaths. But given the resources, again, the clinical trial, they cannot select those hard outcome. And alternatively, they select the surrogate outcome as a primary outcome in their clinical trial. And also, the clinical trial normally come up with one intervention arm and the other comparator arm. But in the real world, when we make the HTA decisions, normally we need to compare the intervention with a lot of the options that is available to the population on the market. So if we only use the result from the clinical trial, we might not have the full capacity to compare our intervention group to all the options on the market. So this is also one of the limitations of this trial-based economic evaluation. And lastly, we have the restricted generalizability to different settings and to different populations. So these limitations are all limit our results from the clinical trial-based economic evaluation to the general setting. But do we have a solution? I want to leave this question to you, and I hope you can answer this question prior to you finish this HTA 101 session. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your lecture. Thank you.